Welcome, everybody. So, I wanted to talk today about creating a practice of mindfulness or meditation. Mindfulness is really a concept that we use in meditation. So, developing a meditation practice is really what you want to get to. However, for most of us, super hard to do. And starting with just basic mindfulness skills is the way to get at it. So we'll talk today a little bit about what's the distinction between these two and why is it that I want you to get into a practice like this. Now I'm wearing headphones. I'm hoping that that is going to help with the audio. So let's get started. Mindfulness is really a practice of being in the here and now, in the present moment only. Now, for women in midlife, this is really tricky because I think we've got a running dial going through our head at all times. We're thinking about more than one thing all at once. In fact, there's a little bit of, social currency in being able to dual task. There's a joke about how men can't do that, but women can do this. Guess what, ladies? None of us can do this. I want you to think about attention as a pie. It really is finite. There's only so much of it to go around. So it's a pie, right? Only so much pie to go around. And each time you're slicing off your attention to something else, you're just giving away more pieces of that pie until it's all gone, right? And some things take our attention with a lot more zest than other things. So if you're driving, for instance, and somebody, starts to cut you off, and that panic surges, your attention kind of goes to 80% of the pie is all on that guy, and you're pissed. And you're yelling at the dude ahead of you that just cut you off. So sometimes our attention is kind of taken to certain things because they, need our attention. And sometimes we kind of value things not necessarily because we're thinking we're valuing them less or more, but we value certain things as things to be paying attention to and other things not to. Now, later on this year, we'll really get into the nitty-gritty of how our brain works and why it decides to value things that actually, if you asked yourself, you don't value or want to put your attention to. Why does it do that? We'll get there eventually, but for now, I just want you to know that your attention, your awareness is a finite resource, and there's only so much of it to go around. And we are stretching it thin, and the thinner we stretch it, the less value we can place our attention on a thing. So if you're paying attention to your kids with about 10% of your pie in the moment and about 70% of your pie in your mind, worrying about, did I do that thing today the way that I wanted to do it? How do other people feel about it? And you're kind of running the dial in your head, then your kids are only getting 10% of you. It's not just 10% of attention. It's really only 10% of the best of you. Okay? So if we want to design a life that we want to live, if we want to design a life that we really love, one of the most powerful things is to get ahead of this idea that your awareness is taken by the things in your life and you're not in control of it, right? Makes sense. So mindfulness as a skill and meditation over time as a practice will build up some neurology in your head. Now, there is a hand-brain model by Dr. Dan Siegel that I use. I'll, of course, put links wherever you're finding this video so that you can also go and look at what he says about this. But essentially, if you think of this as your brain, like this is a side view, your fist is your brain, this is the frontal lobe. So it's right behind your forehead here. The frontal lobe is where kind of how being human is being human. It's our reasoning, it's our problem solving. These are the skills that, say, the apes have a little bit of, but we definitely have much, much more of. And it's what makes us human. So our reasonable, logical brain resides right behind, the eyes, right behind our forehead. If we were to peel open our brain, right, peel those, if you're thinking of your fingers as that frontal lobe, you peel it open, and the center, the core of your brain and it attaches to this brain stem, which eventually will go down your spinal cord. That's where our emotional brain resides. We call it the limbic system. There's all sorts of different parts of your brain that are incorporated in this, but essentially it's right there in the core, in the center of our brain. And there's this place at the back, okay, so like frontal lobe, right? So at the back of that frontal lobe, right in the middle, called the medial prefrontal cortex, that attaches or connects. It's the place where the two touch. It attaches or connects to that emotional brain. And what's important about this spot is that it is one of only 2 spots in your brain where you have the capacity to build skills to self-soothe. And so I want you to just think about that for a second, okay? This means that when in panic mode, this is the part of your brain that's going to get activated and slow it down and get your ducks in a row, right? So when stress is happening, this is the part of the brain that you are really lending on. You're leaning on this piece of your brain because this little place, this little connection, she's the one that's going to get you all access to all of those really juicy thoughts and executive functioning and your problem solving and all your your brilliance, right? This part of our brain knows how to do 3 things: fight, run the heck away, or freeze. So it's fight, flight, or freeze. And freeze has some intricacies that we'll get into later in what we're going to learn this year. But what you need to know about that is it's not so smart. Ladies, this is not the part of our brain that we want running things when we're under stress, because it really is survival mode and it's not the brightest. It'll do what needs to happen, but sometimes it shows up like a bull in a china shop. Like, it's not pretty. And that is not what we want for ourselves. We want to use our reasonable brain. So how do we get at this piece right here? Like, how? So what's the big deal? Medial prefrontal cortex, Dr. Natalie. What do you want us to do with that? Here's what I want you to do. Here's what I want you to be thinking about. This brain of ours, it constantly is changing until we take our last breath. There are pockets of time in our development when it's growing really, really fast. And then there's a whole bunch of time after about 27 years of age where it slows down a great deal, kind of stays relatively same-ish, but always has the capacity to learn and grow, right? We have to be able to adapt. It is one of the most beautiful functions of our nervous system, is that it is literally wired for change. It's wired to take in information, decide what it needs to do, and adapt. Right? So if we're doing the same thing all the time, it goes into a part of our brain that is called procedural memory. We don't have to think about it. It's not touching in that frontal lobe. It's just doing a thing because we've always done a thing. Things in your environment are cueing it, like, oh, I woke up. Next thing I do is coffee. Next thing I do is brush my teeth, right? So you're not having to run through this in a thinking brain sense. Your body mind just kind of goes into it. So what I want you to be thinking about is, if there is this center of your brain that's emotional, and if you're stressed, it's going to get activated. When you're under change, it's going to get activated, okay? Because you're going to bring stuff out of this procedural memory, the way that I've been all my life, just doing the thing, right? That is what we're going to get at, ladies. I mean, the whole idea behind designing a life that you want to live does mean you're giving up parts of life that you've always lived a certain way. You're going to be looking at these, you're going to be deciding if they serve you, you're going to be adapting. So change does trigger us emotionally, and it's really important that we are able to soothe and be reasonable during that change, to notice that the change is happening, name it for what it is, and keep moving forward. Like, yep, I feel super, super uncomfortable because I'm doing a thing I've never done before. Instead of running in and saying yes to this volunteer thing over here, which is what I always do so everybody's happy, I said no because I ain't happy when I go do that thing. It's too much. I already know that I'm taxed, so I can't say yes to this thing. So I now have said no, but I'm feeling super uncomfortable. That's your emotional brain telling you, hey, we're doing a thing we don't know what you're doing. Like, this is not how we usually act, Dr. Natalie. So your system is telling you, oh my gosh, do you know that you just changed things up? And you want to be able to activate that medial prefrontal cortex to calm yourself down, to walk yourself through this new uncomfortable phase of the change process. All right, so this is the why behind why awareness and mindfulness becomes such an important piece of designing a life that you love and that you want to live in. So mindfulness, again, is about being in the here and now. So what's so important about being in the here and now? Well, for starters, it's the only place that you have any power to do anything in. I want you to think about that. When we stick in our head about worries about what's going to be happening in, let's say just this week, we're looking ahead like, oh, I got to get the kids here and I got to do this. And on Saturday, we got to do this. And do you really have any power to affect change around those things? Now, I've sat across the couch from many, many women, and I've done it to myself too, where I reason myself into believing that there's important steps I have to take right now to affect change on a thing in the future. But I promise you, what you do right now does not really do anything in the future yet until you get to that future. Really, the only place that we have power to do anything is right here. It's a little bit easier for us to believe. We don't make any changes, of things that happened in the past. The past is what it was. Although we'll get to that too, because I have some ways that we can rethink about our past in our present moment that does change how it impacts us. But we can't really rewrite the script, right? So it's back there. But this thing about I am constantly planning, I am constantly, wary of what's the next thing coming. That behavior puts us into a thought island that is not here. We'll call it a thought island or a worry island. Literally, you are going off to a deserted island that has nothing to do with the present moment, and you're spending all of that pie of your attention over here, which means there is less of you right here. And here's what happens to you when you do that for years and years and years. Your body mind doesn't know how to be in the present. It feels actually very uncomfortable in the present. So tell me if this is you. Are you somebody that if you've been thinking for a while about this future thing, you've been worrying for a while about this future thing, that you are here in the present moment and things are supposed to be relaxed, like you're on vacation, and you're creating things to do. Maybe you don't even know, you're not even aware, you're just programming the entire vacation. Oh, we're going to do this on this day and this on this day and this on this day. Do you know why you do that? You do that because your body mind only knows how to be off on worry island. That's where it feels the most comfortable. It hates being here. It does not tolerate actually being in the present moment very well. This idea of I'm relaxed and I'm just here and there's a nothingness to being here feels really foreign at the very least, and very scary for some of us that have conditioned ourselves to always be busy, always be thinking, always be planning. So building up a tolerance to mindfulness is really what I want you guys to be working on to get started. I'm not looking for Buddhist monks that can meditate for hours on end. I am looking for about 60 seconds of time at a time. If you could do 60 seconds 4 times a day, that's 4 minutes, that's it. That's all I'm asking you to give to this. Maybe 5, because you gotta kind of set some stuff up maybe. But really, for real, I'm only asking for about 4 minutes. That solidly across about 3 weeks will build that tolerance up so that in about 3 weeks, first of all, it's a habit for you to start to stay in the present moment, and you'll relinquish some of that feeling of discomfort with it. Okay? And you'll be building the muscles in that medial prefrontal cortex, that place that the frontal lobe is touching the limbic system. So as you're building up the muscles and strength in there, you're building up your capacity to be the owner of where your attention goes. Instead of your life being the dictator of where your attention is at, you're reacting to all of these things, You become the agent in the center that decides where her attention will be placed. And that's what I'm trying to help you to get. You know, that's the muscles that we are exercising in that part of our brain. All right. So let's get started. I have some stuff in front of me. Now, this is much more meditation centered. I've got some crystals going on, some in the chakra. Maybe later we'll get into that. It is not my area of expertise, but I certainly would love to show you some resources of people that I know and places that you can go on the interwebs to get information about that. But I am going to do a little bit with the kit that I have given you, because you've all gotten as your free gift a free meditation in a kit. So I want to show you kind of using that stuff, what you can do with that. So usually I have like a dish where I burn stuff. What I have given you though in your nice little handy dandy kit, along with matches, is a little bit of sage or cedar, depending on which one you got. And this little tin can. And the tin can is nice because I want you to open it and let's see. Can you see here? No, I do see here. All right. Maybe not. We'll put this back over here. So you take this tin can and I want you to just take your candle out and put it in that little dish part and take kind of the deeper well, and that's going to be where you put your sage. Okay. And we're just going to, for starters, get something going. Now this is to actually activate a part of our brain and kind of cheat the system here. What I'm trying to help you do is give yourself the gift of a habit. So that, you know, habits I've talked about kind of in a negative light, but they're not negative. They're just things, right? We're using them either for our advantage or not for our advantage. So what I want you to be thinking about is if you build this habit, you're going to need cues to it. And so having a nice tray that just has everything ready on it that you stick under your chair, that's a cue. Like you pull it out and your body mind is like, oh, I know what we're going to do next. The smell, and smell is a really powerful one because you think about it. So our nose goes right up under our eyes, the olfactory nerve, and it actually hits right under that, where that frontal lobe is meeting the limbic system. It almost has only like one juncture between smelling something and emotionally attaching it to something because it gets to our limbic system so fast. Our sight comes in through our eyes. It goes all the way to the back of our head where our occipital lobe is, and our occipital lobe kind of attaches that to meaning-making parts of our brain. So there's several junctures before it hits our emotional brain and says, and how emotionally relevant is looking at this thing for me? That's not as relevant. That's not as strong a cue as scent. And that is why I'm not getting too woo-woo on you. That is why I think it's not a good idea to burn something. Now that could just be a nice smelling candle. You do not have to go out and get yourself some white sage. I happen to live in Minnesota where that is readily available because we have a very strong Native American community here, and I've worked with a Native American community. So this is one of the herbs that I go to, but actually my very favorite is Palo Santo, and I'll show you that later. But you just want to get that ready in the deep well. And I do that just because I think maybe fire hazard wise, that might be better. I don't know. So we're just going to light here this little candle. That's partly for the visual. And I'm just going to put that match in there, and hopefully that gets some of that sage kind of going. So we just want to get that going. And again, most of why I'm doing this has nothing to do with the actual meditation or the mindfulness. It's about building a practice. It's about building, you know, these cues, and all of this will kind of escalate. So we're going to start with these mindfulness tolerance skills, but all of this will eventually escalate into that regular practice that I want you to be having. Oh, great. So that's going. So there you go. You got a little bit of smoke from the sage. So you're going to identify this scent with what I'm doing here. All right. So next, what I want you to be thinking about is give yourself permission to not be great, all right? None of us are as we start this, and actually it's appropriate not to be. Our brain is constantly scanning our environment for new data points, and so it doesn't stay in the present moment without training it to stay in the present moment. So you are normal, 100%. It takes a long time to get to be a meditator or a Buddhist monk or any of that stuff. So we're just going to start at ground zero here. So This mindfulness practice, we got our things going here. Just noticing and naming is really what I want you to focus in on. So we're just going to notice something. I'm going to start with the breath because it's an easy thing that you have with you all the time. And all I want you to do is notice and name what you're noticing. So we try and bring our focus back to the breath, but our mind is going to wander off to something, and we're going to pull it right back to the breath. And when it wanders off, we're just going to name and notice, and we're going to come back to noticing our breath. Then it's going to wander off over here, and we're going to name and notice, and we're going to pull it back to the breath. We're going to do this for about 60 seconds. That's all I want you to do, okay? So close your eyes. You might want to have your feet on the ground, your hands on your knees, or maybe you're cross-legged on the floor. I'm not very flexible, so I don't like that. And first, I just want you to just notice breath. Don't change it at all. Just notice as it comes in your body. Does it feel like cool, warm? As it goes out, where do you notice those sensations? In your mouth, in your throat, in your chest? Just noticing that breath. Maybe you're starting to think to yourself, am I doing this right? So that's a thought and it's come out over here. I'm just going to pull that thought. Just notice that thought, name it. It's a thought. I'm going to come back to my breath. Just noticing the breath right now. In and out. Maybe take a deep breath in through your nose and out through your mouth. Even letting yourself sigh. That turns on parts of our body that tell us we're calm. And you're noticing my voice and your mind is already trailed off. And you're just going to notice, name that. Oh, there's that thought. There's my mind. You're going to bring it back in to that breath. Just noticing. Nothing more. Changing the breaths is not necessary. Just noticing it. In and out and in, out. Just noticing the breath. And having no judgment when you notice your mind go off. Just say, oh, there goes my mind. I'm thinking about lunch. I'm going to come back to my breath. Almost think of yourself as watching yourself watching your breath. Can you do that for me? So just think of yourself as being kind of looking at this version of you sitting, watching your breath. And then you're looking at yourself being the version of you that's mind is wandering. And you're watching yourself be the version of you that pulls it back. All right. That's it. That's all she wrote. It's quite simple. Just mindfulness tolerance. Maybe 60 seconds a day, 4 times a day, if you can do that. Not a big deal. And it's going to get at all of that stuff that I'm talking about, building that medial prefrontal cortex, building the strength behind you owning where you place your attention instead of life pulling you in 15 million different directions. So I wish you well for the rest of your day. Come back to this video. Do this practice with me as many times as you need to.